Folks always devaluing linebackers. When you don't have one, they're very valuable. I'm going to talk about the Jaguars linebackers right now on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. Locked On Jaguars is your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find on every platform imaginable, whether or not you listen to it or you watch it. Make sure you check us out at the Locked On Jaguars page. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us and making yourself an everydayer. Now, today's show is brought to you and sponsored. That's right. It's brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. That's right. Download Gametime, man, and make sure you get all the tickets to every event that you could possibly get. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download today. What time is it? It is game time. It is nearly game time where the games will count for real in Jacksonville and everywhere else around the National Football League. And we've been breaking stuff down ever since the Jaguars trimmed their roster down to 53, and they got their practice squad all lined up, which we'll let you know those names also. But we're going to talk about the depth at linebacker at the end of the show to make sure the Jaguars have adequate linebacker play. Then I'm going to ask the question in segment 2, is Devin Lloyd who we thought he was? It's a great question. And the reason why I want to talk about that is where I want to start with, and that is the rise of Chad Muma and how evident that rise is. Chad Muma this offseason has looked outstanding. A lot of talk has been made about wide receiver Parker Washington, running back Tank Bigsby, and some other players that really have taken that next step, whether it be mentally, physically, or emotionally. But Chad Muma, I don't know what happened, but the light seemed to come on. And now we will find out when they put the official depth chart out whether or not Chad Muma will actually take the place in the starting lineup of one Devin Lloyd. So a little backdrop, just in case you're not, or you haven't been a Jaguar fan for long. I know if you're listening, you are a Jaguar fan. They were drafted in the same draft, and it was a bit of a head scratcher. To give you an outlook at this entire linebacker room, as you know, we like to call things rooms. Devin Lloyd, the Jaguars traded back up into the first round to take Devin Lloyd the same year they took Trayvon Walker. Then in the third round, with a whole bunch of needs, they drafted Chad Muma. Understand that in free agency before the draft, they had signed Foye Oluokun. And they were going to run a 3-man front with two Mike linebackers, and then the outside linebackers were going to be Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen. So you would think if you're playing two off-the-ball linebackers as a base defense, and this team needed everything, why on earth would you trade up after signing a linebacker in free agency? Would you trade up into the first round, giving up an additional third-round pick to do so, and turn around and draft another linebacker? Turn around and draft another linebacker in round 3 in the same draft. Then this offseason, Foye Oluokun, who's been lights out and one of the best leaders of this team, Foye Oluokun gets a contract extension, a huge contract extension. The thinking back then was, okay, they'll play Foye Oluokun for a couple of years or 3 years. That's what they signed initially to a 3-year deal. Then what they'll do is they'll have replacements already in place. Devin Lloyd is a first-round pick. Chad Muma is a third-round pick. If Oluokun's number is too high in the third year, or if he plays through his contract, by the time he does that, he's pushing around 30 years old, we got the replacements right behind him. When they re-signed him, that went away. And I think they re-signed him because, one, he's been very, very good, and you don't let good football players walk out the door. But two, I think there was some hesitation to think that, much like Walker Little hasn't taken that step, that somebody hasn't taken the steps necessary in order to make cutting him easy. Because they could have let him play this year out, but that is not what they did. And they had the cap space to do it, just to see how things were going to go. It was so bad. I think they were desperate enough that they had to keep him. So now here we are. And then we come into camp and we just assumed that it was going to be Foye Oluokun and it was going to be Devin Lloyd. And then they were going to maybe find something in Ventrell Miller that will allow them to know that at some point they can just let either Muma or Lloyd walk. 9 times out of 10, it was going to be Muma. He was the one they invested the least in. He was the one that fans and media had the least amount of expectations. And then we come into camp this year, they changed the system to an even front, based down 4 linemen, where they're going to, in some packages, they'll have a middle linebacker, a strong side linebacker, and a weak side linebacker. There are some sets where I've seen in the preseason where all 3 of them have been on the field like a traditional 4-3. But in the sets where they haven't, and I'm not going to make too much out of where they did it in camp, because we've seen this. Christian Braswell was starting at the nickel and then he got cut. They were mixing and matching people. But I did notice in the games that I've watched that Muma seemed like he was playing a little better, like he was more free. Like the light had come on, he was faster. His eyes seemed to be playing faster because he was diagnosing things quicker. And then the coaching staff has been raving about it. And it made me think. They either believe, and on the little depth chart they give you before games, and even the one that they had on their website, which we haven't seen the final one yet, they had him as or the starters. They said Devin Lloyd or Chad Muma. It might have said Chad Muma or Devin Lloyd. And then they had him as a pure starter at Sam, and it said Chad Muma or, and then they would have Yasir Abdullah. He's listed at 2 spots as an or guy, right? That depends on alignment, but that's not the part I'm talking about. The part I'm talking about is I get the strange feeling that next week when we see that depth chart and when they run out on the field, Chad Muma is going to go out there with Foye Oluokun, and that's going to be a shocker. And I'm sure the Jaguars at some point will tell you, we still value Devin Lloyd, this, that, and the third, and blah, blah, blah. And it's true. They probably do still value Devin Lloyd, right? Why would you devalue a guy because he's your 3rd linebacker? But it would lead me to think that if things were equal, they would play the person who they've invested the most time in and has the biggest upside. Ryan Nielsen has come in here and said, man, it is all about competition. Nothing is given to anybody. It is about competition. And if you ask me from what I saw, now temper this, I don't watch the eye in the sky. I can watch a little all 22 if I want, but even with that, it doesn't mean that I'll see it the way the coaches and the evaluators see it. I just got a gut feeling. I have a gut feeling that what has happened is they trust that kid more than they trust Devin Lloyd. That's just my opinion. I could be very wrong about it. Once the official depth chart goes back up, he looks like he just played better than me. He looks like a more instinctive player. Here's what he looks like. He looks like this, and this is a fact. He looks like a guy that was a pure linebacker, a pure off-ball linebacker his entire life, even in college. Devin Lloyd looks like a guy who's a great athlete that some people around here even said, let's put him at edge. We should let him play free. We should just put him and do this and use him. He should be the backup edge, or he should be this, and they need to use his ability. Anytime you hear people saying, especially about a 1st-round pick, anytime you hear people saying they're not using him right, or they need to do this, or they need to do that, then you need to ask yourself, is it them or is it the player? I'm going to explain that, and I'm going to ask you, what did you think Devin Lloyd was? And has he lived up to it? Is Devin Lloyd who a lot of us thought he would be? No, he's not. I'll tell you why I feel that way in segment number 2 on Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is brought to you and sponsored by 5 Hour Energy. Now, usually right when I have lunch in the middle of the day, when I'm taking a break, I get tired and I don't feel like working anymore. They got a nickname for it. It's called itis or something like that, right? You get really, really tired. If you're tired after lunch, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. That's right. You got to get in the zone, man. 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. With zero sugar, convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. That's right. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for 20 years to give them the alert energy feeling that they need to get through a busy and hectic day. Here's what you got to do, man. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONFB. That's right, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, thank you for joining me here on segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. We talk about linebackers, man. We're all over these linebackers today because I think it's one of the most interesting things that we're going to have to get through and talk about this offseason. I'm telling you, man, listen, Devin Lloyd has been the talk of so many conversations that have been had in the barbershop, the talk of so many heated debates. And I think it's because Devin Lloyd, they traded up for him. And then you look at his physique. He got here, and when he got here, there were people saying he's going to be the best player out of all the rookies, including the number 1 overall pick, who was Trayvon Walker. Well, when he got here, he immediately started working out. He worked out with one of the trainers in local Jacksonville immediately, and they put it on videotape, and everybody was all gung-ho about Lloyd. It just hasn't happened for me, though. And one of the reasons I think they kind of had this with Miles Jack when they drafted Miles Jack in the second round back in what I believe 2016 or 17 when they picked Miles Jack. Miles Jack was a great athlete, but he didn't play linebacker full time. He played running back. He played safety. They even lined him up at corner sometimes and in the slot. I think what happens is when you're playing linebacker, especially off ball, kind of like a middle linebacker, sort of like a weak side linebacker, when you're doing that, once you get to this level, there are some instincts you have to have. And if you're a guy that moved around a lot, like Lloyd did when he was in college at Utah, and was just used as sort of this freaky athlete, almost like, they used to call it an amoeba, like dudes are all over the place. I think when you do all of that stuff, you become a master of nothing. Because a guy like Muma, who's probably been a Mike linebacker since he played Little League football, because you knew exactly what he was, where Lloyd has this really, really athletic, long, angular body. And it just seems like to me, while everybody wants to say, well, Fred Warner was that. Fred Warner was a hybrid. And look at Fred Warner. He's one of the best. Fred Warner's going to the Hall of Fame. Everybody isn't like that. That's what makes guys like that special. I just think the reason that Muma is getting it is because it's not about being physical. It's about this. And it's about the instincts that come along with playing the position. You want to talk about instincts? Look at Ventrell Miller. Ventrell Miller's smaller than Devin Lloyd and Muma. He's not terribly athletic either. But the thing he has is he has that navigation system that all of those players, even if they don't have the quick twitchiness about them, they know exactly where they're supposed to be, and they get there real quick because they diagnose everything really, really fast. Now, by no means, I don't want anybody to think that old Wig is sitting here saying that Devin Lloyd isn't smart. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you haven't been asked to do something, maybe the instincts aren't there and he's thinking a little bit too much because he's trying so hard to do and be where he's supposed to be, doing what he's supposed to be doing. But the problem with that is he has to think about it and he has to try as opposed to just reacting. We can't keep saying that a whole new coaching staff is using him incorrectly. If he doesn't win the starting job, that'll be 2 different defensive coordinators with 2 different schemes to where Devin Lloyd has been a little bit disappointing. You have to start asking yourself, and you have to remind yourself that football, especially at this high level, isn't just about measurables. It isn't just about traits, especially that position. It is about seeing it, and diagnosing it and understanding what is going on. Most guys in that situation, if they didn't have Foye Oluokun, somebody would have to be directing traffic and telling everybody where they should go and what they should be doing. Me personally, I don't like, and this is weird because they're both the same height, and I think they're listed at around the same weight. I can check that here really fast, but I know Lloyd used to be almost in the 245 or something like that. Yeah, they're 6'3", 235 for Devin Lloyd, 6'3", 239 for Chad Muma. But when you look at him, it doesn't seem like Muma is 4 pounds bigger. Muma ain't got a whole bunch of muscle definition. Devin Lloyd is like yoked, right? There was some talk that and I told people they need to cut that nonsense out. They were talking about he looks like Greg Jones. And I said, well, there have only been 3 or 4 people in the history of the NFL look like Greg Jones, so I got to come see him. And I saw him. I said, y'all must not have saw Greg Jones in person. I know Greg Jones. Like, if I see Greg Jones out, if he sees me before I see him, he'll go, hey, man, what are you doing? That's how much I know Greg Jones. Greg Jones, he doesn't look anything like Greg Jones, and people need to stop that. Yeah, he got in better shape. He probably changed his diet a little bit, and he realized that he had to do a little bit extra to get better, and I'm not trashing the kid. Trust me. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you see more of Chad Muma this year than Devin Lloyd won't be back here after his contract runs out. And his 5th-year option likely won't get picked up, and you're probably going to see them re-sign Chad Muma. Even in the days where it seems like linebackers are, they come and go and they're a dime a dozen. I don't agree with that either. I just think that most NFL teams have capable linebackers. They are valuable. You want to feel want to see how valuable somebody is? Wait until your team doesn't have whatever it is we're talking about. Oh, running backs don't matter. Okay, now don't have a running back who can pass protect and make people miss. Don't have a linebacker. And this team has been without linebackers before. They should know when they lost Telvin Smith and when Posluszny retired, and they lost Telvin Smith with his early retirement. This team was looking around searching for linebackers like they want a milk carton. That's why when these guys started out here in 2021, why do you think they went and got 3 of them in one off season? Yeah, in one off season they got 3. I mentioned it at the top of the show because you absolutely need linebackers. And you don't really realize it until you don't have one. I'm not saying the kid is a bust. Maybe he just got beat out by another kid that they drafted. It's happened before, man, with quarterbacks. I was in Washington when they drafted Heath Shuler in the 1st round and Gus Frerotte in the 2nd round, and Gus Frerotte ended up starting more games in it. I wasn't in Washington anymore, but I remember they drafted RG3 in the 1st round and then drafted Kirk Cousins in the 4th round, and Cousins ended up playing more in Washington. It happens sometimes. It's rare that it happens at quarterback. You can draft 2 or 3 linebackers in one draft, even though most people will say that's crazy because, well, I wouldn't trade up for one these days because you can find good linebackers in 2, 3, and 4. And y'all know I hate saying you can find. But you can, but they're not just going to fall in your lap. You still have to identify guys that fit what you do and that fit your program. And the Jaguars might have a dude that they picked in the 3rd round who fits their program way more than a guy that they traded up back into the 1st round to go get. I actually had a rumor that told me that they were going to draft Quay Walker. They were going Georgia one. They took Trayvon and they were going to go right back and take Quay Walker, and Green Bay snatched him, so they had to move up because they got desperate. Whatever the reason, he's here. He may start, but I don't think it's a situation where he's clear-cut going to get more snaps. I really don't. We are all still waiting for that big playability that everybody talked about. We're all still waiting for the interceptions. We're all waiting for all of that stuff to happen. And I know there's probably a PFF grade out there somewhere that says he's really, really good. But I'm not saying he's bad. All I'm telling you is this. If he was what y'all thought he was, there wouldn't be an or on that depth chart or speculation that he might not be the starter. I do, however, believe linebacker that they're going to be okay at linebacker. I like the room. I like the way it is. I like Devin Lloyd being on this team. I'm not talking about this man like he's K'Lavon Chaisson or somebody like that. No, I like Devin Lloyd. I want to tell you a little bit more here in our last segment about what that linebacker room actually does look like. Is there depth? Is there enough? Well, I think it is. And I'll tell you exactly why I feel that way in just a second here. Segment 3 coming up on Locked On Jaguars. I first have to tell you about this. And that is, man, Locked On Fantasy Football. That's right. It's that time, man. You make Locked On Jaguars your first listen. So your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season, like me. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we're going to discuss the depth at the linebacker position, what the room consists of, why I like it so much. We'll do all of that in just a second here in segment 3 on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. Yeah, man, that Gametime, the one I always tell you about, where you can get the tickets at the last minute and won't be judged for waiting till the last minute for whatever reason you missed it. If you know what, if you're going out to see the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks, there's a Labor Day offer. It's 50% off Labor Day offer for that game. That's right. Details is in supplemental pages. Make sure you look that up and check out the Gametime app. Any event, there's always a super deal and how good it is. A friend of mine bought some tickets to the Florida and Miami game on Gametime, and he told me how much he saved, especially when he used the promo code. That's right. Locked On. Here's what I want you to do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, and I'm going to spell that redeem code for you. LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Man, it's game time. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen, talking about linebackers, dedicating a show here on a Thursday to the position that everybody seems to think has been totally devalued. Like, why are you paying a linebacker? There have been teams that had that philosophy forever, right? And I find it funny when teams get to the point where they say, I ain't paying no linebacker, right? Just because they've had some success. All of them aren't the same, though. There's every now and then you get a Luke Kuechly that transcends all of that stuff. Every now and then you get a Patrick Willis that transcends all of that stuff. And I don't think Foye Oluokun is just your run-of-the-mill linebacker. The dude has either led the league in tackles or been in the top 5 like every year for like the last 5 seasons. I think he's a real good player, and he's going to continue to be a good player. And he gets after the ball, and he makes up for a lot of mistakes that people make. And he's Johnny on the spot. He can be Johnny on the spot with turnovers. He moves around really well. He does a lot of good things. Both Lloyd and Muma have had their moments. Both are big, strong, physical. They don't present any physical deficiencies. And Lloyd is instinctive. He just probably isn't this is not as much about Devin Lloyd not doing something as much as it is about Chad Muma actually doing something. Chad Muma actually just saying, hey, man, I want it, and I'm going to get it, and working and going out, and maybe is a little bit quicker here, understands a little bit more stuff there. Make no mistake about it. I think they have a good room. I like Caleb Johnson's ability to cover, and I like the fact that he can play special teams, so some of these other guys don't. But I think he covers and he runs like the wind. He's the smallest of all of them. He goes like 220 pounds at 6'2". He doesn't look it, though. He look because he's rocked up. But Ventrell Miller isn't the biggest. He's like, they list Ventrell Miller at 6'1". No, they list him at 6 feet. I don't know. You might get mad at me when I say that because I talk to him all the time. I don't know if he's 6 feet tall, but if he is, he's barely 6 feet tall. But he's real, real instinctive, man. And I hate the fact that teams sometimes, and this is on Trent Baalke, man, he's like, well, that dude doesn't fit our system, like Quincy Williams. He let him go for a bag of peanuts, and now the dude's a Pro Bowler. He's one of the best off-ball linebackers in the league and would fit this system tremendously. So sometimes it's not about guys that fit your system. If he's a good enough football player, I don't know who I heard it from, but I've heard it a lot of times. If a guy's a good enough football player, he fits every system. Wade Willips probably said that. If he's a good football player, he fits anywhere. You can make it fit. You can change your defense to make it fit. And I really believe Ryan Nielsen's that kind of guy. I think he's a mix and match guy. I think he wants versatility. In fact, I asked him a question. Is there a fine line between having guys that are versatile, but then having guys that do a whole bunch of stuff, but don't do one thing any good? And he said it was a good question. He said, but have you watched the game lately? It's not the same, man. You got to be multiple. You have to be multiple. I think Devin Lloyd has a multiple athletic skill set. I don't know that he has a multiple mental skill set. I wouldn't necessarily call it mental, but just thinking the game. And that has nothing to do with him or his capacity to learn as much as it has to do with you learning this at the highest level. And it's something that he really didn't do in college. They really freestyled him in college. He was all over the place. And he was a matchup nightmare, but that's in college. In the NFL, that doesn't work so much because people will – the one thing about the NFL, man, they know what you don't do well. And they will formation you into a point where you have to do that thing that you struggle at so mightily. That's what they do. That is why eval is so important. I always say, if you've ever heard me on this podcast talk about how important evaluation is, even if you don't need one, you better evaluate him. And whatever your book on him is as a coach, when you play against him, use it. Yeah, I remember this from draft day. Let me see if he knows how to do that. You remember his 3-cone? It wasn't that good. Or you remember this? Remember how we said the reason why I didn't like him is because his hips were stiff and he doesn't see it. Well, you know what? I remember that about him. We're going to call this play and this play from this formation. We're going to move that guy over here now. Tell me, can you do it? They will exploit you to death. And the thing about it is, the head your coach, when he sees it happen, when it's happening in real time, oh, he knows it. He knows. He's like, oh God, here we go. And now you're over there wishing and praying and hoping that your guy can get it done. And like I say, it ain't like Devin Lloyd can't get right. If they start Devin Lloyd, they'll be fine. It just looks like the other guy has taken a big step forward. And if they're going to start really just making this all about merit, where you earn everything, I wouldn't be surprised if Chad Muma is your starter and gets the most snaps next to Foye Oluokun this season. I know y'all think I'm starting trouble. I'm not. I'm just letting y'all know what the deal is, man. We're going to do our Friday show tomorrow, and then the next time you hear from me, it will be game week, and we will start getting ready for game prep. I think that depth chart will probably come out Tuesday, maybe Monday or Tuesday, and then all of these questions will be answered. I hope you did your fantasy football draft, because as much as I appreciate you making us your first listen here, go to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast and get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the descriptions, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Hit all of that content up. If you're getting a Jaguars fix, you can always go back and listen and watch all of the other shows that we have done. Pile them all together and then see where we are. By the way, the reason why this was also talked about today is because I had 2 mailbag questions about linebacker. So I did promise mailbag yesterday. That's kind of what I gave you. I just didn't tell you where it came from. But that's it. I want to thank all my little program directors for sending me those questions. Make sure you keep it coming on all platforms and social media, even in the comments on YouTube. All right, man, you guys take care of each other. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.